There had been many inquiries to the studio wanting to know the process by which animated films were made. These inquiries reached a climax just prior to the opening of Snow White. Walt was contacted by one of the RKO field representatives out of New York, explaining to him that there was a constant clamor from their patrons for information about the making of cartoons. Disney saw an opportunity here for self-promotion. What we'll see now is this film, a trip through Walt Disney Studios, which was shown only to the RKO exhibition forces prior to Snow White's release in 1937.